Before I start, thank you so much to everybody who supported the channel so far. Honestly, as soon as I read what you had to say, I wanted so badly to post another video right away, but it took a little while to get everything together for this one before I get to put it out and hear what you think again. If this is the first video of mine that you're watching, I will be continuing an illustration that I started in the last video, but you don't have to watch that one to understand what's going on here. And what do you say we keep the good vibes going? So I finished it. I finished my Hadrian and Athens illustration, and it only took me 6 months. Even though I'm not done with all the other concepts that I was talking about in the first episode, I'm pretty happy to set this idea aside for now. I was thinking, while I was finishing it up and looking back at my sketches and all the other ideas I had, I would probably want to wait for my skill level to kind of catch up to my vision. I did start learning Blender this year, and I was especially thinking that a lot of elements in the illustration would look really cool in 3D, and that would also give me more fluidity and flexibility in executing that idea. So even though I have a lot to learn still, I see myself making a lot of progress towards that, and I would say I'm familiar enough with the basics that I feel comfortable doing my own experimentation. So I will probably return to that idea sometime in the future, but overall, I'm just very happy with how the digital illustration looks now. I'm not sure if I said this in my last video, but I feel like the process of making this was very healing for me, and it allowed me to rediscover all of the things that I love about being alive and being an artist and seeing the world that way. And I really got to make it personal to me and reference my own photos and my own experiences, which a lot of the time I feel like I don't do that enough in my art. So I'm very thankful for it. I only made minor changes in the recording that you're seeing, mostly adding details in different places around the illustration, which is usually when I get to that stage, that's like what tips me off when I need to say, maybe this drawing isn't done, but I'm ready to be done with it, which is my exact attitude towards writing essays and things like that. Because making all those tiny adjustments and just like going over and over the same areas, I feel like that turns into an endless cycle really quickly, where it's like I leave it for so long, or I spend so long editing it, that I suddenly realize like my art style is in a completely different place. So I will never feel finished with this, I think, especially with all the other stuff I have going on, all the other ideas based on the same theme. But I feel like it's time to let it go, even just for the moment, so I can clear some space in my mind and on my scratch discs for new ideas. I've done a lot more traditional drawing recently, so that will make up most of the content in this episode. Even when I don't use them as the basis for digital paintings like I did with this illustration, traditional sketching and drawing is a really important part of my process, and it's so helpful in gathering my creativity and developing new ideas that I have. I'm also just feeling a lot better about my traditional art, and I feel a lot more comfortable sharing it with other people. I recently switched back to a bigger sketchbook, which I love having because the first thing is I just really like being able to arrange multiple concepts on one page and explore multiple ideas. I have heard a lot, like the idea that you're supposed to fill the entire page or draw as big as you can in a sketchbook, and I did do that. I did that in my smaller sketchbooks that I had while I was traveling, but I just really don't like that approach. I think it can improve your technical skill, but like that's not what I use my sketchbook for. Like my sketchbook isn't a workbook for school or like something that I have to use like to study things. It's a fun place for me, and I just don't enjoy the end product when I make really big drawings. They just look wrong to me. So I'm not doing that anymore. but it's also nice not to have those space constraints that you have with a smaller page, and feeling less of the pressure to make everything look good together, and also having less flexibility. I wouldn't say like I'm still not at the level of productivity or creativity that I feel like I was a few years ago, but it's nice to start feeling like I have that safe space again where I feel comfortable trying different things and expressing my silly side. And I do plan on doing sketchbook tours when I get home in the summer, because if I were to do those, I think I would want to start in chronological orders. But I haven't decided if I'm going to include the one that I finished last winter. It's not super current, but I just feel like it's an important one because that was how I developed a lot of the mindset and art style and just like way of approaching art that I have now. And I feel like it was really the beginning of me finding like my artistic identity, especially as an adult and like coming of age. But I did try filming a video about it last summer, and I felt like while I was just flipping through the pages, I ended up like using a lot of sticky notes and like taping things off, taping pages together, skipping over pages, saying like, this is too personal, this is NSFW, and I'm not going into detail on that because like I don't want to, or because my family's in the kitchen and they can hear me. I've already posted a lot of the pages I want to share anyway, so that's like another consideration. If people are really curious about it, I'm definitely down to do it, and I would really take that into account, but I would have to think a little more about it. But the next one after that I finished, I am saving for a different video, so it probably won't get like a sketchbook tour of its own. The other thing is just that videos where I talk on camera are pretty hard because at home it's like I'm living with my family and I don't have the privacy to get into everything I would really want to share. But I promise like I will have sketchbook tours for you this summer. And another interesting creative development that I wanted to talk about is that I've been writing a lot more, which I feel like the impulse to write kind of came to me out of nowhere, but I'm very happy that I found it because this is not a unique struggle, but just like I love thinking about my characters and I love thinking about my story, but it's just hard to like put all the ideas I have together and connect them the way you have to do when you're making a cohesive story. And because of that, I am a long way off from finish everything and have been for years and years, but I have seen myself making a lot of progress in the projects that I have. Earlier this year, I was applying for something that required a writing sample, so I think that was a big push for me to go back and look through all of my work and improve my style and my skills. If you are at all familiar with my neglected OCs, they are all characters from the show that I've been writing since high school, which is set in Roman Athens under Hadrian, which is a really fun time to research and to explore for me. And I think it's helpful to have like those multiple ways of exploring those characters and time periods and situations, because sometimes when I'm working on certain things, I feel like only art or only scripting or even only prose writing, which I also kind of do, isn't enough to get at every angle that I want to explore. So it's helpful to me to be able to switch between different media. And I feel like my art and my writing and also my academics, like as a classics student, feed into each other in a really constructive way where my creative life pushes me to learn and research new things, and my academic life introduces me to ideas that I want to put back into my art. Writing for TV is kind of a douchey hobby to have. At least I'm not writing for film. But I really appreciate also being able to synthesize the visual and narrative aspects because I feel like I get to develop my art in a more holistic way. And I would actually really recommend TV writing if you get writer's block easily or if you struggle to finish your projects. But it's so much easier to take things 30 or 40 pages at a time, basically only writing the dialogue and a few like really stripped down action cues, and I think the medium gives you more room to digress from the main plot and just follow whatever's most fun to write about. Here's some more stuff that I'm working on. I am currently having coffee. I made my favorite cafe campana, but I put too much whipped cream on it, so the ratio is a little screwed up. It's fine. I have cake with me as well, but I don't think you can see it because my roommate and I have both had at it and like picked the different fruits we don't like out of the cake, so it looks really gnarly. But I am reading Virgil. I'm trying to make a dent in the Latin homework that I have for this week. And I have to say, like, making my own coffee, my own espresso, made a massive difference in my schedule that I was not expecting, where I literally get up at 7 every day because I can never believe how good it is every time that I make it. I was in the trenches the entire fall and part of the spring semester choking down the grodiest, grainiest dining hall coffee because they only have those gross tea bags that are actually more disgusting than brewed coffee. I've tried every combination of lemon, honey, sugar, milk, everything, and every kind of tea that they have. The gross constant comment tea, the gross lemon ginger tea, the gross chamomile tea, the gross green tea. I don't get how you mess up a tea bag, whatever. But I also realized that I'm like the kind of person where I'll just sleep and it doesn't matter how long I stay in bed, I'm always sleepy. So I'm trying to just like get up early, like just get up when I remember to wake up. Morning is also when I feel most productive and most motivated to do schoolwork, since I like having the night for my drawing and writing and more like personal fulfillment. I would say that overall I'm a big night person. I love an evening coffee break. I love a late night walk. Night is like so good for so many things, and there are people who just sleep through it, but it's also just that until like midnight, I feel very brain dead after a day of classes, and I just don't have the energy to concentrate on any work and actually get anything out of it. Like, I can force myself to do a reading, but I won't understand it enough to have a productive conversation about it in class the next day. So I would rather like just do my own thing and leave all the homework for the morning when I'm fully awake and I can sit at my desk and I can have coffee and just like concentrate for an hour or however long it takes me to do. I guess I'll talk about Virgil a little bit. This is unscripted. I didn't write anything about Virgil, but I'm realizing that I should make this voice memo a little longer to fit the length of the clip. I was like hesitant about reading the Aeneid. I wouldn't say I love it. It's not. I think I enjoy it. It's like pretty easy to read. Virgil's style is very straightforward, but it's also, there's like a lot of elegance in it. And I definitely enjoy the imagery that he uses. I think it's very cool to look at the references to, obviously, earlier Greek and Roman epic poetry, but also looking at, like, Virgil's own previous work. I'm learning so much about Roman literary culture that I didn't know before, and that's been a really valuable aspect of the course for me. Yeah, I think the Aeneid is also, it's a very accessible book to read. I can see why it was very popular, aside from being like written by Virgil, who was already famous at that time and very enduring. It's cool to think of it as like a text that kids in Rome would read as part of their education, and it's like it's still being used in more or less the same way today. It's like I'm reading it so I can better understand Latin, and obviously to a different end than a student in ancient Rome would, but still the same basic application, which I think is really cool. I finished my homework a little early, so here I am working on some drawings in my travel sketchbook while I have the extra time. And this is definitely the opposite end of what I was talking about earlier, where you have to draw super small, and there's no option to make a bigger composition or to just scale up one drawing. I take this with me pretty much everywhere, and I use it basically like a journal for keeping track of what I did and where I went. sometimes I go back and I add more details or add color and different media to drawings that I did from life. I like adding stickers and gluing receipts and tickets and things like that into the sketchbook. And I started doing this almost 6 years ago. And that was a time when, like, I had been working, for context, like 6 years ago, I was going into high school and I was working on a graphic novel. And so I really wanted to improve drawing interiors and landscapes and backgrounds in general. So when I went somewhere interesting, I would draw the background basically and use that as a means to improve. That kind of fell off for me because I stopped working on the graphic novel and I still just don't really like drawing backgrounds. So I tend to pick out just more individual subjects, like an interesting cup or an interesting plant. Sometimes I do draw an entire background if it's visually appealing, but it's not something I'll like force myself to do anymore. Usually it's something I do when I don't have other inspiration, but I have been using it to draw a lot more just from my imagination as well, which is not something that I used to do very often. I kind of use my main sketchbook for that, but it's nice to be able to include that in the travel sketchbook and not make it kind of like a utilitarian thing where it's only for studies. So I bought this particular sketchbook while I was having a huge spring break emergency. This one has a story where I was literally at large in a strange city, and I had just used the last page in my old travel sketchbook, and I had used it up at a museum, so I thought that was perfect timing because I could buy a new one in the museum gift store, and it would probably be like really cute and remind me of going to that museum. But all their sketchbooks were wrapped in plastic, so I bought one because it was just labeled sketchbook and it had a nice cover. But then like I went to open it up and all the paper inside was this like handmade paper that was very nice. It was very sturdy, but it was like it had these pressed flowers and leaves in it. So it was super textured. There were all these visual abnormalities that you wouldn't want in a sketchbook. It was basically like unusable for my purposes. And I was so upset with myself. I was in a state of shock. I just needed to get a new sketchbook as soon as possible and like make this entire problem go away. And my roommate, I was on spring break with my roommate and she saved my life and was like, she pointed out a random stationery store that just happened to be on the same street where we were walking. And I went in, it was the size of a closet and they only had one sketchbook there, but luckily it was the right size. I was disappointed because I had also, before I left home, coming back from winter break, I was thinking like maybe I should bring a spare travel sketchbook. But then I thought it would be so easy to get one over spring break, like it wouldn't really matter. I get to pick out a fun sketchbook. And then I realized the only sketchbook they have in the store is this exact same kind as I have at home. I have like a blank one of these sitting in one of my drawers, and I had no choice. I just bought it. I drew the line at buying a plastic cover for it because I also own a cover at home, and that's the kind of thing where like if you're not taking your sketchbook out and about anymore, you can take off the cover and reuse it, which is also why there are some parts falling off the cover as it is now, which is fine. I'll print new ones. I'll glue things back on, whatever. But yeah, I was in a pretty bad mood about it. I was very sour on the sketchbook at first because, like I said, like it was the only kind and it was one I already had. But when we got home, I decided to decorate the cover, and I made the decision to decorate the cover, and that was definitely the right move because I felt so obsessed with my vision and my execution and my initiative, and yeah, I enjoy using it a lot more now, and I'm glad that I got one that lends itself to that possibility. and I'm glad I got one that lends itself to that possibility. The drawings I'm working on now are those that I began during a talk about reparative readings between Sappho and Homer. I will say most of the information from that has already left my brain, but the idea is just to question the more cynical literary attitudes that often prevail and look at Sappho's poetry as an attempt to engage constructively with Homer, to insert herself as kind of a comforting and protective figure. I'm not really even sure why I went, because this thing is just really not my bag, but both my Greek and Latin professors were really encouraging people to come, so I just thought I would show up. In hindsight, I see this lecture playing out in my mind as like a scene from a sitcom, where every other line of the lecture, it cuts back to me sitting there and there's a laugh track, because the things that came out of these people's mouths were so outside of anything I would ever listen to normally. Not that I disliked it or thought it was a waste of time, but most of it just went in one ear and out the other for me. There were a lot of people who were really into it, and I'm glad the speaker found her audience, because this topic deserves one for sure. It's just not me. If you are into the subject, maybe you want to message me and I can send you scans of the handout, because as you can see in this video, I am using it as scratched paper for my markers. Again, no disrespect, it's what was at hand. So I will think more critically about attending random department events, but I like how the little spread turned out. Patrick's Day was last month. It was a fucking nudie. I obviously didn't go out, that's not my style, but I did get a little bit dressed up. So here's my outfit. I was really feeling it today. Please ignore my Willy Wonka hair moment, but I got dressed up, first of all, because it was fun and this is one of my favorite shirts, and I also get to wear all my green rings, but I also wanted to wear something nice because I went to a very chill, like, on-campus party that the International Student Center was hosting, and I was very nervous to go because I went completely by myself and I didn't know anybody there, but it ended up being really fun. I didn't end up talking to anybody really. I talked to some of the hosts and that was about it, but it was nice. There were some performances by the step dancing group on campus, and they said there would be mocktails, but by that they meant they would have lemonade and sparkling water and cranberry juice, so it's not bad. I'll call that a mocktail, I guess. And my shirt was a hit, my rings were a hit. I mean, I got a few compliments and I felt popular, but yeah, I only drew some of those little beads at the event, and then I worked on everything else once I got back to the dorm, as you can see in this chapter. To set the mood, I put on some trad music. This is a playlist that I have with my sister, and she is definitely much more into that aspect of our identity than I am. She studies Irish and she studies Gaelic and always gives me good music recommendations, so I thought I would put on that playlist while I worked on these drawings. My roommate was extremely good-humored. She didn't come home and tell me to turn off that noise. You can probably hear the voice clips in some of these. I believe I said, I'm having a Kaylee for 1. Do you mind if I make it a Kaylee for 2? And she said, go ahead. So we listened together. She shared some fun stories from when she went to Ireland. She's performed with her dad in some pubs. He made her sing Wild Mountain Time in front of his audiences. and I'm not sure if that was a good or bad memory for her. But I really just made a few sketches for fun. I wasn't expecting much from them, so I was really happy with how, in my opinion, how gorgeous this page looks now. The beads were also very much like filling space and adding color, but I just got really into it. Like, I wanted to add stickers, I wanted to use different media. I also really liked my Irish coffee drawing just because I enjoy drawing food, and that's not something I would take the time to do digitally, so my sketchbook is just a fun place for that. I also have strong feelings about the aesthetic value that's contained in the commercialization of most major holidays. I have to say, I think St. Patrick's Day is one of those with the best aesthetic. Feel free to complain about turning a religious and cultural celebration into a drinking holiday. I agree with that completely. I do not think St. Patrick would want people to be going out fighting each other. The green and gold color combination is literally my two favorite colors, so they make me super happy to work with in art. Again, I'm not saying I support this attitude, but also some of the St. Patrick's Day slogans on t-shirts and stuff are just like mind-blowing. Like, what do you have to be on to come up with this stuff? I would love to see what these marketing people could come up with for any other holiday. I literally can't think of any that don't come off as insanely offensive, and I'm not saying that because I think like St. Patrick's Day celebrations are inherently offensive to the Irish. I just think it's funny. While I was working on these, you can also see on the same page some of my previous drawings that I had earlier from when I had been watching some movies. These particular sketches are from this adaptation of The Golden Ass. It has a very long technical title, but we will call it L'Asino d'Oro for convenience and to differentiate it from the novel that it's based upon. So I made some drawings from that movie. I could only find a really low quality copy on YouTube, but apparently RaiPlay, of all places, has it. The version I watched had a few scenes that skipped or repeated a lot, so sometimes it could be hard to orient myself within the plot of the movie as opposed to the plot of the book. And the dialogue was also kind of hard to understand. There were no subtitles at all, and everything was, of course, recorded in 1969 on what sounds like a fishing boat's radio. But I really loved the theme song. It has lyrics in Latin, and it was composed by Teo Usueli, who scored a lot of Mondo and Giallo films from what I see of his catalog, so it makes sense to me that the sound is less typically cinematic and it focuses more on recreating Roman lyricism and music while bringing out the role of magic and mysticism in both the film and its source material. That brings us to the book The Golden Ass, which is also known as the Metamorphoses. It's by a man called Lucius Apuleius, and it's probably one of my least favorite works of classical literature that I've read so far. In case you're not familiar with the book, it's basically just a fantasy novel about a man who is obsessed with using witchcraft to turn into a bird, but he ends up being turned into a donkey instead. One of the things that it's probably most known for is being the source for the myth of Amora or Cupid and Psyche as well. But aside from being bad, The Golden Ass also flopped and had zero cultural impact, so I won't spoil anything in case you perhaps haven't read it. So I was surprised how much I enjoyed the movie. They changed the ending entirely to one that still doesn't make all that much sense, but at least fits the tone and the contents of the film. Unlike the book's ending, that was another issue a lot of people bring up, is that it's very dissonant from the tone of the rest of the novel. The plot overall was pretty different. They restructured the plot to focus on a more autobiographical interpretation of the novel. A lot of academics do support this interpretation because Apuleius was involved in a court case related to his marriage because Pudentilla, his wife, was a very wealthy widow in Athens, and some of her family came together and accused him of using sorcery to seduce her in order to get her money. I had no idea about this, and it made me actually a little curious to reread The Golden Ass with this perspective, because as much as I dislike the characters and the plot, I am wondering if I might maybe understand something that I was missing the first time, even if I don't enjoy it anymore necessarily. The movie is actually set in Mauritania instead of Thessaly, which is where Apuleius himself grew up. I would be curious how many of you have read The Golden Ass or seen L'Asino d'Oro, and if you did enjoy either one. I don't see people talking about either of them a lot, but especially not the movie. And while I can say that personally the book is not my thing, it is a very interesting specimen of Roman literature. I don't want this to turn into an Apuleius hate video. I don't want to discourage anybody who has been thinking to read this book. And of course, I don't want to make anybody feel bad who enjoyed the book. I can see why people would enjoy it, and there are plenty of things that I like that I see people hating on, that people don't understand, that are even objectively weird and bad. And you have my full support if you are an Apuleius fan. I completely get it. Maybe one day I'll be an Apuleius fan too. I don't know. Maybe if I watch this movie enough. To be fair, it was a little difficult because, as I said, the video quality was so bad. Like, sometimes I literally couldn't tell the characters apart or see what was going on. But the colors were not really impressive. The patterns, the makeup, the hair, it was just like, it was a little bit boring to me. That may make you wonder what I did like about it. But I think when I watch these movies, the most important thing for me is just a sense of whimsy and fun and willingness to have a good time and have an open mind. And that's definitely how I felt watching this movie. It's such a whimsical film. And the movie, I think, added the light comedic touch that Apuleius didn't have. And it made it into something where there are bad things that happen, there are bad people in it, but first of all, the resolution makes more sense and I think is better deserved. And it's also just, Lucius is a lot more sympathetic. And I do think also having the love story is nice. It makes him seem a little less shallow. And it's also, I think, a much more relatable experience. So anyway, at the top of the page, I drew Barbara Boucher. She was the female lead in this movie. She played Pudentilla. And I did this in kind of a different style. I referenced some 60s and 70s romance comics so that I could do like a flat color drawing, because I just feel like the style that I have never works out with flat shading. Unfortunately, the ink smeared while I was erasing the sketch. So I did try to cover it up, but that resulted in the really ugly orange shading. The drawing of Eros is older, so it's not strictly related to the movie. They did reference the story between Amor and Psyche, but didn't try to adapt it. Understandable, but it seems on topic, so I don't mind having it there. I was also only able to get Lucius to look okay by copying a poster for this drawing, the spread that you see right now, and there are not really a lot of photos from the filming online, which is too bad because I kind of feel like I would draw the characters again. I would enjoy it. I like the characters, I like the actors, I like them in this movie. I would love to do more fan art for this, so I will probably have to just rewatch it and make my own screen caps to draw from. Hopefully I will upload them somewhere so other people can use them. And I would look forward to doing that. I think it would be a lot of fun. I was glad to have found this movie. Even though I have my issues with it, I'm happy I had my mind open to different ways of looking at Apuleius' work, and I would recommend it. I am happy to leave the link for anybody who's curious, so just let me know. I took a few trips off campus recently, mostly to the art museum. I went once with an art history class I'm taking, and then back as like a field trip with the classics department. I got to see these John Singer Sargent murals that I've been admiring online for a long time, but I was kind of sad because you kind of have to lean on the balcony. There aren't many good places to sit down. There was a nice mezzanine area, not very well lit, but very restful and cozy for when my feet hurt and I just wanted to work on my sketches. I always like being able to walk around and discover things on my own, but I learned a lot going with my class and being able to look at works of art and learn things about them that I might not consider as a casual visitor. I went to see some of the Greek and Roman art as well, and they didn't actually seem to have a lot of Roman stuff, especially. Maybe I missed a gallery. After that, I tried walking through the more modern European galleries, but it was very crowded, and the museum layout was just a little confusing in general. I really enjoyed the Islamic art collection. These miniatures are so gorgeous, and I think they presented them really well. I went to see a little bit of Chinese sculpture. I didn't have a lot of time left, so I kind of had to hurry back out, but I had fun, and I definitely hope to come back and explore again in the future. Here is a better clip of my outfit. I made that ring myself. And now back to my desk. First of all, enough about how my desk looks different in every shot. I had to rearrange furniture recently, and I also just went grocery shopping and I found a little present for myself at the store, so I had to make room for it. Second, I talked for way too much time already, so I'm going to try and keep this chapter kind of shorter. You'll notice the footage is sped up, so that's just what's going on there. Anyway, I'll move on to talking about the second movie that I watched with one of my friends. It's called Satiricosissimo. And so in addition to these sketches that I'm going to collage now, there are also a few more random ones, so I don't have as much to say about them. I'm hoping you won't mind if I skip over those and just kind of focus on the movie as a main topic. I should mention I found it looking for Satiricon screen caps that I haven't drawn before to add to my collection, and in the image search results, I just found like a slide from a random PowerPoint presentation that lists it as a third adaptation of the Satiricon, and I was shocked because if it's a Satiricon adaptation, how come I haven't heard of it? So I looked it up on IMDb, and it did seem like my kind of thing. It's from 1970, and it has Edwidge Fenech as Poppaea, and I consider it my current greater goal to track down and watch every adaptation out there, so I was definitely willing to give it a shot. It's a movie by these guys, Franco and Ciccio, who are a comedy duo that mostly made parody movies of whatever was in the zeitgeist. Right away, both of us were eating it up because it's about two best friends, and one of them is a jobless loser who's obsessed with the Satiricon.
Wait, is this fucking play about us?
We lost our minds at the beginning because the entire opening credits and theme song, like not just the title theme, not some orchestral composition, like a theme song with lyrics, are animated. And we thought the whole movie might be a musical. We kind of got our hopes up, but it wasn't, except for one scene where Nero gives a poetry recital. I'm not going to lie, making a movie called Satiricosissimo sets my expectations really, really high for what kind of felt just more like a Quo Vadis parody than a Fellini Satiricon parody, just on a Silver Chalice budget. I was getting heavy Asterix vibes from the visuals, especially because there were a lot of sight gags, which I don't mind in terms of humor, but as for aesthetics, this would be a bad thing because I don't know if you've seen any, if you're familiar with them, but the live-action Asterix movies are horrific. It is weird to think of anybody mining the Satiricon pop culture moment, if such a thing ever happened. I'm not sure how much overlap there is between the average Fellini viewer and the average Franco and Ciccio viewer, because I guess that was the big historical film that had just come out, but I get like maybe halfway through the movie. And they haven't mentioned the Satiricon for like 45 minutes by this point. It just never came up. Like, I didn't catch any references to it. And looking at Franco and looking at Ciccio, it just starts sinking in that I don't think either of these guys can spell Satiricon. My guess is that the extent of the historical research for this film was literally a stack of Asterix albums and the trailer for Fellini Satiricon. There's this ancient Rome themed party at the beginning where one of the extras says this:
Meraviglioso, perfetto. Se fosse qui Fellini, diventerebbe pazzo.
Be so serious, please. Fellini wouldn't be caught dead here. And, you know, fool me once, fine. I have no problem with guys using the name of the Satiricon to run around in tunics, eating peeled grapes, and taking milk baths. But I was surprised that Fellini's film and Petronius's book were so irrelevant to the plot, as well as just the overall style of humor or artistry of the movie. So what happens in Satiricosissimo is Franco and Ciccio are best friends. They get a job as waiters at a Roman banquet where Ciccio is very excited since he loves ancient Rome and he loves the Satiricon especially. Franco's kind of along for the ride and to make wacky faces that lighten the mood, but just when things seem like they're going fine and they might work out for a change, they break a jug of priceless Opimium wine and are forced to make a quick escape to avoid being whipped. After running through the brush all night, the guys wake up in ancient Rome, or a country road outside of Rome, as slaves of Petronius Arbiter. They immediately gain Nero's favor by accidentally saving his life, and are simultaneously recruited by Poppaea for a secret society Seafar, whose secret handshake is a slap in the face. This was my favorite part of the movie. While Nero believes his mother is trying to kill him, the mastermind actually ends up being Poppaea, which implicates the clueless Franco and Ciccio, who still probably understand this whole convoluted web of lies better than I do. Most of their surveillance takes place at this restaurant, Osteria Tremalcini, spelled exactly how I have it in my drawing in the video. They're pretty loose with what's Italianized and what's kept in Latin. The Osteria also hosts a poetry festival where Nero is the only surviving contestant, and which ends in a riot. While making a smooth exit, Franco and Ciccio accidentally start the Great Fire of Rome and are sentenced to death. But after entering the arena, Petronius saves their lives and they escape through a hidden tunnel, and it was all a dream. It's very slapstick, and the satirical elements were tasteless for sure, but combined with what I think was sometimes overly physical comedy and topical references, it never really rose to the level of entertainment or commentary suggested by its title. Also, because Italian isn't my native language and I am far removed in both time and space from the pop culture scene of 1960s and 70s Italy, I don't think these references would have ever worked for me. I do often enjoy more lowbrow or referential humor, and I had fun watching it, but it does start to cloy towards the end. I remember also thinking that I wish somebody had made a historical comedy movie just about Edwidge and her henchwoman, because although nobody's going to accuse the Satiricosissimo cast of good acting, I really enjoyed their looks and the dynamic between the characters. I think the casting was overall kind of unimpressive though, especially this unnaturally smooth Petronius who looks like a horse trapped in a human's body. The score is pretty good. It's by Carlo Risticelli. I was very pleasantly surprised because he also did the music for Polydoro Satyricon, which is his magnum opus in my opinion. And again, in my opinion, it's the best film soundtrack of all time. It's definitely that kind of lighthearted and slightly depraved comedy that he seems to have specialized in making music for. Satiricosissimo literally borrows footage from higher budget movies strategically, so in terms of its own sets, it tends to be pretty small scale and basic. I'd say they did the best with what they had for everything except the arena. The costumes are fine, but can we also talk about how Ciccio is the Rome guy of the duo, yet he's always wearing like a bodysuit under his tunic? All that stuff was a little weird. That didn't quite land for me. I just had to skim through the movie to get screen caps, and another thing I'll say in its favor is that I love the camera work. It's really dynamic and complements the style of humor and acting really well. Now back to being a hater. I did make live sketches while I was watching, but I just felt like I needed to finish all of them in color in order to just make them look the way that I wanted, so I ended up using them more like notes of what I want to remember, and I did the more polished, colorful versions on a different sheet of paper that I could cut out and collage and just arrange on the page however I wanted. While I watch movies, I pause them a lot in order to draw a specific frame or pose or capture the right lighting in the scene, and so these drawings are usually pretty rough because I know I can go back to that part of the film, even though I am actually trying to finish these kinds of sketches more consistently. One other thing about Satiricosissimo is that the idea of a color palette didn't seem to be a huge consideration for this movie, so it was a little hard to pick out the aesthetics and themes to bring out in my drawings. I basically just chose some myself, and that's not a bad thing. I think sure it could have improved the movie, but I don't think it reflects badly on the filmmakers that they didn't have a super strong concept for considering what the movie is. I think it's also kind of typical of like the mid-budget historical films from this era. I would think because many of them are imitating more large-scale productions with auteur-style directors who do have a particular take on ancient Rome. But even with less conceptual movies like this one, I really recommend trying to use them as opportunities to improve your art. I used to not be a film person at all, and I think most of that actually had to do with not having the patience to watch an entire movie, but understanding the artistry of film and how, of course, I can apply what I learned from it to my writing and to my visual art has really helped me improve and also think about what I make in a very different way. Doing a bit of reverse storyboarding in particular is so helpful for learning composition, and personally, if I see a costume I like or a character I like, I never need an invitation to start drawing it. Next on my list, I have a few similar 60s and 70s B movies, but I am also really curious to watch the new Seneca film that came out in March. I've seen the trailer and it looks interesting. It seems to have a very different interpretation of the time period than a lot of recent media. I think the whole genre has been missing the sense of fun and experimentation and also openness to anachronism for a really long time. And I hope it encourages more directors to take creative risks so that every movie about ancient Rome stops looking the exact same. I would totally encourage just the industry to accept that sometimes making a movie that's interesting and fun to watch is more important than making a movie that follows history or are sometimes flawed ideas of history to the letter. I have not found it anywhere online yet, so I'm not sure if I'll actually be able to see it. I'm keeping an eye out for a DVD release as well, which is making me a little hesitant because I'm trying to avoid buying DVDs where I can. I think I often just don't bother watching them, so I'm trying to keep my collection, especially for movies that aren't streaming or that have really cool bonus features and things like that. I used to always leave thrift stores with a copy of My Big Fat Greek Wedding and whatever, but the fact is that although this reflects so poorly on me, I am not taking out my DVD player, changing my region settings because I have to pretend I'm from Italy to watch my Satiricon DVD, starting the movie, and listening to those scratchy whirring sounds whenever I need to pause it just for the Silicon Valley Season 1 bonus features that are already on HBO Max. But I definitely don't want the DVD release to die out. I'm trying to do my part, and I'm glad to see them getting more appreciation as an alternative to streaming, and as a way to learn more about the films through commentary and special features that a lot of streaming platforms don't bother to preserve. I particularly have an affection for rare Italian new wave, if such a thing exists, those kinds of adaptations of Roman literature, and none of those, to my knowledge, ended up being particularly widely successful, especially not to be picked up by any streaming services. A lot of them you can barely find on a DVD. And those weirder, more unique films are also the ones that were often censored or restricted in terms of distribution when they came out, and so they can be especially hard to find. So I see buying DVDs as also a way of preserving those movies and making sure that it's not only the Warner and Marvel productions that get passed on as a part of film history. I'm not sure how likely I am to come back to Satiricosissimo. I just feel like I don't have that much to say about it. It was really fun to watch once. I would give it that. I would say watch it with a friend if you have one. I'm very lucky that my friends are so tolerant of me, but not everybody shares my film taste, so that's definitely the way to do it. And if you like peplum movies in general, especially bad ones, I would really recommend it, I think. But if you'd only watch it for the Satiricon references, you can very safely skip this one. You won't miss out. It's really nothing special, and as much as it had good moments, I'll leave it to you if you want to try and pick them out from the rest of everything that happens in this movie. So I drew Edwidge and Karen Schubert, the wand, in cute matching hearts, and I also have this illustration of Nero and Petronius at the Poetry Festival that I just did from a screen cap online. Most of my sketches were just signs and things like that because I thought they were funny and I wanted to keep track of all the jokes within the set design. As always, I wanted to add stickers, but in this case, it was especially important to me because that would kind of tie the whole page together and solidify the aesthetic and the mood that I wanted to communicate. Another thing that I really enjoyed as part of the movie and its branding, but also that I enjoyed recreating, was the lettering of the title. It was just so fun and very dynamic, and I knew I had to draw it. The CFAR sign was a last-minute addition, so I know it looks a little rushed. I just had to make sure that I could really fill all of the space on the page. I tried a lot of configurations with just the 4 drawings that I already had, and it just didn't work out. The final few touches were the cherries and then the putti. I think they added the kitschy look and drove home the impression I'm going for, and I have been trying to improve drawing cherubs since I'm not so good at basically drawing babies, but they come up a lot in Roman art and then like Renaissance art, so I think if I want to keep looking to those time periods, I will need to become more comfortable just like drawing people at different stages of life with different body types, things like that. I like how they turned out, but I'm especially happy with the drawing of Nero and Petronius with the title at the bottom. That's just something I feel so satisfied with and so excited about when I open the sketchbook to this page. And I think looking at the spread in general, it's like, yeah, this movie wasn't that good and I didn't get what I signed up for, but it really reminds me of like having so much fun talking about it with my friend and laughing at it most of the time, but sometimes laughing with it and just like enjoying each other's company as much as we were enjoying the film. And I'm really happy that that comes through. I think that's just as important as being able to capture all of these characters and the mood in these scenes as well. I wish Satiricosissimo was a better movie. I do. I think it could have been a better movie, but I'm very happy with how my drawings turned out. Alright, I was really pleasantly surprised. I was worried I would have to edit out a lot of important stuff because I talked for too much time in earlier parts of the video and had to cut it down a lot, but I actually have some extra time before the video is over. But I know you've been listening to me talking for almost an hour by this point, and I feel like there's nothing for me to say without repeating myself, so I'll leave this here for now. The rest of the video is just me finishing this sheet and adding all the stickers and the collage stuff that I keep in my sticker collection. I kind of thought finishing my Hadrian and Athens illustration would take longer than it did, which means this little series was short, but you can definitely expect more of this format, more film discourse, more similar art and themes in the future. Pretty much everything I talked about is a subject or a topic that I hope to come back to, and that will probably be an important point of reference in the future on this channel. I can definitely promise that if you enjoy the Emperor Hadrian aspect of this video, this is not the last time you will hear from him. And also just a little bit of self-promotion before I go. I uploaded that drawing onto Redbubble in case you want to have it as a print or as a sticker. They have a bunch of different stuff like shirts and notebooks and things like that as well. But I also have lots of other designs on there that are very similar. Some of them are also Hadrian themed artwork and some are just Roman in general. Thank you again to everybody who supported me on YouTube so far. I hope you're having as much fun on this channel as I am. This video took so long to record and edit, but I did enjoy the process and I think it turned out pretty nicely. I'm still deciding on what the next one should be about. I have a few scripts I've been working on, but I'm deciding between doing like another speed paint because I do have recordings for an unreleased drawing, but the last 2 videos have basically been me drawing, so I'm kind of thinking of leaning into the history and commentary side a little more. I know, again, like, I talk so much in this video, but I did try to cover some different topics, both within the content of this video and then also compared to my first video, so hopefully it didn't seem too repetitive or too homogenous and you enjoyed hearing some more about my drawings and what I have going on lately. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.
Last night was a movie. Hell yeah, dude. And that movie was Satiricosissimo, dude. The lyricism.